coaching role with a kind of logo below. So I'm not going to sort of explain that background. There's various websites, or there's a website you can go on to find that out. But I think one of the things that's at the heart of what I do is British American football. I have been a BAFCA director. I was a BAFCA director as well for a couple of years. But both as a player and as a coach, I think I've taken a lot out of the game, and I've also putting a lot back into the game, and hopefully that's, not hopefully, because hope is a word that I'm actually going to try and avoid use of, that's tactically played, but I'm going to be doing over the coming weeks, months, years, and I've kind of begun to do so increasingly more and more. Before we start though, I want to kind of turn attention to you. Really basic classification of expertise here. And I don't want you to be scared of the word expert, the green one at the bottom there. Just have a look at that list. How would you assign yourself to one of those 4 categories? I'll give you about 20 seconds to read through those. In terms of coaching. Okay, everyone done that? Just kind of nod. Sort of say you think you've done that. Okay, so how many of you are novice coaches? Okay, how many of you are apprentice coaches? How many of you are practitioner coaches? How many of you would say that you're an expert coach? Okay, so just the 2 of us at the moment. Okay, and again, that's quite useful. And I think, one of the things that's quite key to a lot of the stuff I talk to coaches about is actually about being reflective, and Matt said it earlier, about reflecting on your own experience and actually trying to use that to improve what you do. I've put some stuff on the Facebook group via my Twitter account. I don't know if any of you have seen. And this was a presentation I did 7 years ago at the BAFCA convention, or a BAFCA convention, looking at kind of how you reflect upon yourself. And if any of you watched the Football Life program the NFL Network does, there was actually a program on Bill Parcells this week, and he talked about the man in the glass, and there's a poem about the man in the glass, which I thought was quite synchronistic that it happened the same week that I'm delivering this. But again, I think that's really important. It's all about seeing what you can do and holding a mirror up to what you do. So teacher mode is clearly on. I've had a background in teaching, and a bit like Matt talks about his managerial coaching role within his profession, his paid job, I kind of do that as part of my role as a teacher. So I think it's important to look back at lots of things that you've done and see if you can build on those experiences. And as I was putting this presentation together, in fact this one almost came in as a slide right at the end, I kind of reflected back on some of the key influences on me as a player. So Marcus Allen was one of those. And again, in a football life, there's a really good quote that he says right at the beginning of it, it's about a minute and 40 in, that says there are 2 kinds of people, those that know and those that don't know. And I think at times in football coaching, those things hold true. So I'll come back to that. And again, some images of me playing in different strips for some of the different teams. Again, I think trying to model myself on Marcus Allen, I think there are some similarities. So there's me, top left, with a white hat for the Bournemouth Bobcats, blue hat for the Colchester Gladiators. In fact, Bournemouth was my first ever senior year, which probably depresses me to know that 1989, was anyone not born in 1989? Yeah, I was playing senior football in 1989. Well, that's really depressing, isn't it? The PA, who are now Farnham Knights in the red hat. The yellow is the Southern Sun Devils. The black is the Bristol Aztecs, who I played for most recently. And the one in the white hat, another white hat, the green there, kind of worries me a bit because actually I wore a different colour helmet from the rest of the team. I don't think, in fact, I know I wouldn't do that now because I have a condition called CDO. Does anyone know what CDO is? No? Well, I'm going to try and avoid, this is I think one of the only slides that's got animation, I'm going to try and avoid using mnemonics today. So join the mnemonic there. And I've posted on the wall some of the mnemonics that I might use, but again I'm going to be quite brief. Now that's what CDO is. It's a bit like OCD, but it's got things in alphabetical order the way it should be. And I think that kind of characterises the way that I played, that I coach. And I think fortunately as I've got a bit more older and a bit more experienced, I don't impose those standards on other people. So for example, and this might be where some of you, and particularly some of the presenters, might get a bit self-conscious, or maybe not, they probably don't give a toss, and that's fine. You know, how you dress, I think, has a significant impact upon how you're perceived by your players. You know, Matt's talked about first impressions being important. And so when I decided what I was going to wear today, one of the hardest decisions I do when I go out into the public world, I decided that I was going to be matching. So there's a colour theme going on with the kind of the gold and the black and the white, but everything is Nike. So I've got my Nike shoes, I've got my Nike tracksuit bottoms, I've got a Nike t-shirt on underneath, which I'll take off in a minute. I've got my Nike bag. So everything kind of matches. And again, as I was putting this presentation together, that bothered me so much I actually had to turn it into a green helmet. So I had to superimpose that. And there's a reason for this, about wearing all different kinds of hats. I noticed that some of you have downloaded and printed off kind of the 4-page handout that I've kind of put forward to say that you can use this. That's related to a theory by Edward de Bono even, he's not the U2 singer, that talks about different hats that people wear when they're dealing and processing information around them. Facts, emotions, planning, benefits, problems and ideas. And again, I think at times it's really important for us as coaches to be aware of which hat we've got on at which time. And at times even be planned and prepared enough to switch hats, to throw our players off balance slightly, to put them in different situations, to throw our other coaches off balance at times if you're in that kind of senior position. So the emotional red hat on the left, this doesn't have a pointer, a laser pointer by the way, I'm waving it as if it does, but it doesn't. So the emotional red hat, people have talked this morning about kind of keeping emotions under control. Bill Walsh talked about causing creative tension, actually planning in situations where he would go off on one and lose it with a coach, with an assistant coach, but that was to try and motivate his players. And again, he didn't do it all the time because that would be boring and predictable, but he was aware of what he was doing and he was very good at managing his emotion because he planned them. So what we're going to talk about today is a whole range of theories about kind of how you can coach effectively. And again, I draw kind of some parallels, not in terms of my playing career and my skill and ability to play the game, but a quote Walter Payton talked about not being the fastest, not being the strongest. But what he knew was that he, was one of the smartest people around. And he was always thinking about what he was doing. And in fact, I had a conversation coming off a practice field a couple of years ago where another coach, we were discussing something and it ended up, the discussion ending that he saw that I was right about a situation. And he says, you know what, John, your problem is you think too much. To which I kind of said, well, thank you, but if you're not doing the same, what are you doing? If you're not thinking while you're out here as a coach, what are you doing? So, thinking about what we do is really, really important. So, the first thing I'd like you to think about, if you haven't already begun to think about stuff, is I'd like you to I'm going to give you a minute to do this, is to take the pink post-it note and to, in whatever form suits you best, is to write down what you think your aim is from this session. And if anyone needs a post-it note, I've got and I'm quite happy for you to keep it focused in on this session or broader to today if you want. Okay, so what is your aim for this session? What do you aim to get out of this? And it doesn't have to be full sentences, just something that makes kind of some sense to you. And then if you've done that, just kind of make eye contact to sort of indicate that you've done so I can gauge how quickly the group's going. And then just put that somewhere where you can see it. So over the next 40, 45 minutes or so, that's something that's in front of you that you're going to try and get from this session. And I'm hoping, I'm expecting that I will cover most of the things that you want, or I will cover the thing that you want. so that you can be a more effective coach. And that might not be in this session just right here, but it might be in the buzz session afterwards if you come out to that. It may be that we have to follow this up via Twitter or Facebook or some other form of communication. Okay, but I want to help you to progress and develop as a coach. And again, some other key words here, so that you're able to complete stuff or you're able to achieve things. Okay, and again, the orange notes have been posted around the room sort of intentionally. Because this is what we're aiming for. We're aiming to do something slightly different. Again, you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. So we need to use Malcolm Gladwell's term, we need to be an outlier. We need to do something special. You know, special for our players, special for ourselves, special for our team. Being in the middle, doing the same as everyone else is boring, is dull. Being average is dull. And again, I haven't heard a speaker yet talk about you wanting to be average as a coach or average as a club. So, you know, let's be great. And again, I think Matt may have seen this earlier before you talked about yours. You know, I'm going to get you a little bit out of your comfort zone because that's where the magic happens. But importantly, the things you should focus in on, thing on your pink slip, are the things that matter and hopefully the things that you can control. And I'm not going to talk to you about goal setting and SMART goals and all that entails. I'm going to make a massive assumption, it's very dangerous, that you kind of have some indication or some idea of how to set yourself a goal and how to set yourself a target. And in fact, you're doing it for players as well. And again, I think there's a key difference between using the phrase or the process of hoping for something or the process of focusing. And again, we're going to try and avoid hope. And in terms of focus, I'm quite happy for you to kind of to lose focus for a bit or to keep your focus keen and fixed and narrow. There's going to be loads of stuff I'm going to throw at you in this presentation. I expect some of it to go over your head and by the side of your ears. Subconsciously, some of it will sink in, and it'll only be later on when you reflect upon this. And hopefully, if John's battery lasts, when we're able to post this up so you can see it, you'll reflect back and go, actually, I need to take that down. I need to make a real note of that. There isn't one key thing I'd like to tell you. There are lots of really important things, and you'll draw out what's most important for you and what's important now. And again, some of the kind of, I'm not going to put a reference list up, but some of the people I've drawn influence from include someone called Zoe Alder, who's written a book called Full On Learning, who talks about marginal gains. Have any of you heard marginal gains, that term? Where have you heard that?
Dave Brailsford?
Yeah, Sir David Brailsford, who's the performance director for British Cycling, and he talks about the aggregation of marginal gains. Making a 1% difference to 100 things will make you better. And again, you know, I think there's a real important lesson for us to learn about that, and that's kind of part of the reason why I put the wheel up there, because again, I think that's a really good model. And, you know, I think this is one of those moments, I'm expecting, rather, that some of you go away from today thinking, that was the day when my coaching suddenly got better. That's what helped me make that transition. And I can recall back to, it was in my previous life in Stoke-on-Trent, because I've moved back there after a 13-year bounce around the rest of the country. And I remember watching the film Fallen with Denzel Washington, and that was the quote that really resonated with me. You know, that there were key moments in my coaching life that actually made me progress on from one stage to another to another. Okay, and again, you know, I think that's the important thing about moving forward. So it is the dawn of a new day. There are going to be some questions and answers that I'm going to give you and pose to you, but there's probably going to be more questions than there is answers. So let me start off. I just need to look at my own cheat sheet for this. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. So first of all, when you practice, who here is involved in warm-ups? So just stick your hand up. Okay. How? So let me ask the coach right at the back there. So.
I chat with the players. I let one of my positional coaches run, who's a strength conditioning coach, and he'll warm them up, and we'll go around and make sure that they're doing the movements right and just getting to know the players.
Brilliant. Okay. So who else? So again, just kind of keep your hand half up. So who else is involved? So where? Next question. Where do you stand during warm-ups?
With players as part of his team.
So by the side of them, in amongst them, and are you static or are you moving around them? Okay. So again, hands up if you're a coach who's involved in a warm-up. I try not to avoid people I work really closely with, but if it's only you three that are involved. So Mark, so what do you do as a warm-up? What does your club do as a warm-up?
We do the same warm-up every time, so we do number stretches and we do dynamic stretches.
Okay, so here's the key question. Why do you do stretches?
So that we can warm up, so we can get injured.
Okay, so why do you want to avoid players getting injured? So don't answer that. So someone else answer that question. Why don't you want to get players injured? It's not a trick question.
You want them to play.
Because you want them to play. Okay, why do you want them to play? You want them to help the team. Why do you want to help the team? Here's the real question then. Why do you want to win?
It's better than losing.
Why?
Because it's more enjoyable to win.
Why?
Feels good.
Precondition.
Say that again.
The precondition to want to win.
Why?
The point of sport.
Why?
How do you measure success?
Yeah.
By winning?
Yeah.
I've asked a different question there, haven't I?
No.
Without using one of my key words. But the key thing is, I think, if you keep, and the writing's on the wall here, if you keep asking the question why, you will get to the hub and or to the nub, to the core of what you're doing. So in the same way that Coach Mike was talking earlier about understanding your philosophy, drilling down and using a process that's actually called a Sigma 6 process, asking 6 why questions, will actually get you to the point of what you're doing in terms of warm-up. So if we go back to that, we kind of ended up, I think, on about number 5 or number 6, so it's fun, so it's enjoyable. How many of your warm-ups are fun and enjoyable? I've been around a lot of different football teams who warm up in a lot of different ways, and let me tell you, not many of them are fun and enjoyable. And it's no surprise that other coaches who feel a bit kind of not confident delivering them kind of step aside, and I've given them a lot of benefit of the doubt here, and that's the reason why perhaps they don't engage with the team during that warm-up, rather than because they want to catch up with their other coaching colleagues, or it's a last-minute plan or a last-minute adjustment to the plan. And again, I think that has a real impact upon how we coach. Perhaps if the real reason is because of fun at the level that we operate, okay, perhaps we need to go back and relook at how we can make things fun. So this may or may not be the zen of coaching, but Wyse, kind of play on words for my name, is going to help you to do some kind of 360 sort of analysis to hopefully feel that you're victorious at the end. So this is what I'm going to get you to do. Can you read that phrase out loud? Just do it. What's missing?
You.
No, it's you. Okay? Just doing it is ultimately down to you. So again, take what you want from this. But importantly, make the first step. And although Matt talked about taking a helicopter view and being an overview of what's going on, again, I think it's up to us as coaches to just get on and just do it. And my title of my presentation was Coaching Effectively, You too can do it. So what I'm going to take you as a kind of a rapid, early introduction to middle part of this, is I'm going to take you through 22 steps, going from a can to you too. And those of you that were here early will kind of know where I'm ending up with on this one. So bear with me. And the reason I did this mainly is because it was interesting for me, and I felt that if it was interesting for me to put this together and to deliver it, it might be a bit interesting for you, because the enthusiasm will kind of rub off. So let's go. So bear with me. And again, if I lose you, that's great, because I'll get you back. So let's start off with a can. Okay, from the title slide there, and I've put my Twitter account on there, which I'll come back to in a bit. So the first thing, obviously, is a can there, which obviously holds liquid. There may be a Gatorade can, again, built by ourselves, a kind of link from earlier on, which hopefully is a feeling as a coach you might want. And I was reading something actually last night from some coaching notes I took 3 years ago that talked about a coach wanting to actually get his players to practice that victory celebration, because that was what they were going to end up doing. And of course, there is another kind of G can, a jerry can, that you might use to put fuel in. And do you know what that is? Jerry Cantrell. See where I'm going? See kind of how my mind works. And of course, he's the lead singer, he's the lead guitarist. I'm obviously not a guitarist, where the hell that. He's the lead guitarist with a rock band, but it's not that one. Do you know what that rock band is? Yeah, Kiss. And again, there's a definite no, this is a no Kiss zone. Okay, and what do you know by the mnemonic, the acronym KISS? Keep it simple, stupid. I think that is the death of effective coaching. And coaches over a number of years, and if I've worked with you, you might feel a little bit paranoid here and you might be really cautious what you say around me in the future. Coaches always say, well, I want to keep it simple. Don't answer this out loud, but why? 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 And I think at times it's because either they aren't confident stretching themselves and putting themselves in a position where they have to kind of think on their feet, or it's because they don't know, or it's because they're a little bit lazy. And again, I'm very cautious about calling people lazy, you know, behind their backs or to their faces, or certainly via messages. And there's been lots of opportunities over the last couple of months where people post on Facebook about various complaints they've got with BAFCA and the national governing body and the leagues and various and this and that. And sometimes I just want to put, coaches, because you're lazy. It's because you don't want to do this. It's because you don't want to be stretched. You don't want to challenge yourself. But obviously, if I did that, I'd get keyboard warriors going mad. So this is a no kiss zone. So again, or I'm going to extend it to be a no kissing zone. And again, you know, think about something that all coaches kind of are probably aware of, the plan, do, review cycle. All kind of familiar with that. I don't like it because I think it's a bit too simple. And again, with the work that I do, let's show you this one here, with the students and staff I work with who work on a sporting excellence course for 16 to 18-year-olds. I work with a number of national governing bodies, boxing, basketball boxing, fencing, golf, judo, rugby union. I have to do those in alphabetical order as well because I'm my CDO. But when I deal with those NGBs and others, it's clear that, you know, this is a process that athletes and coaches have to go through. So they have to assess, plan, train, compete, review, improve, repeat, repeat. Assess, plan, train, compete, review, improve, repeat, repeat, which rhymes as well. So I don't want to use this, but I probably will. If you're an auditory learner, that may help you to remember it. Okay, and obviously there's loads of visual stuff going on, and we might do a little bit of kinesthetic stuff if time allows us. So Alice in Chains is the band that Jerry Cantrell plays for. I've kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent there. And one of their songs that I played earlier was a song called No Excuses. And I think, you know, again, that's really important. I used to work next to a lecturer in university. I was a lecturer myself, and he had a sign on his door saying it's a no cry zone. So whenever students came up to him with sob stories as to why they couldn't do something, he would say, see the sign on the door, go and cry elsewhere, come back when you're ready and focused to actually progress and move on. And again, I think there's a key lesson there, that very often when we try and correct each other, ourselves, players, there are 101 different excuses why I couldn't do something, why we couldn't do something. And at times we just need to say, hold on a minute, don't give me an excuse, let's work to progress and make you better, or make this more enjoyable. And again, I think, you know, you can draw inspiration from a whole range of different sources. Steve Gleason, who used to play for New Orleans Saints, he talks about no white flags. Again, I think that's really quite important. So let's go back to No Excuses. That was from the EP that Alice in Chains put together called A Jar of Flies. And if you think about flies, I'm going to tell you about 3 different experiments that they've done with flies over the years. Experiment C, so I'm going to reverse alphabetical order, is where they put a whole load of flies in a jar, and after, I think, a couple of hours, and so the flies would bounce around, and after a couple of hours they would take the lid off the jar. And all the flies stayed in the jar, because they'd learned that there was that ceiling above them, above which they couldn't go. And some of you have already understood the parallel to the way that some of us sometimes coach, haven't you? That we put that lid upon them, say you can't do that, it's too complicated, but as soon as we remove the lid, players aren't able to progress anymore. So that's really, really important. Quote there, which I think encapsulates that pretty well by Bruce Lee. Okay, got that? So experiment B, another experiment done with bees this time. Okay, and what they did is they put some flies in a jar, but turned the jar end on, so that the open end was actually against a window, facing the light. The closed end, they actually cut and opened it up. And what they found was the flies could fly around and would eventually, randomly, go out the back end where they could actually be effective. When they did the same with bees, bees had been trained to fly towards daylight. So the bees would be flying and continually backing themselves up against the glass, but the exit route, the way to be successful, was right behind them. But they would continually work to actually say, no, that's the way out, that's what I've been taught, that's what I've learned. So again, I think there's, some important lessons for us to learn from that experiment. And in terms of talking about bees, of course, you probably have heard this famous quote. I think Mary Kay does some perfume. Yeah, no one here is going to be brave enough to go, yeah, you're right, John. Are you? But I don't know if it's her that came up with this quote, but it's about a bee not being aerodynamically designed to fly, yet it does it anyway. Think about the players that we have to deal with. Some of them are designed, as you said earlier, not in a way to actually make them be effective football players, but they are. And again, I think we need to be able to kind of live with that one. Experiment A with the flies goes back to the 1600s. And an experiment here, basically, if you kind of read it across the rows, 3 different experimental situations. First one with some meat in a jar. Flies obviously flew in and it created maggots. The second situation in the middle, there was some gauze at the top so the smell of the rotting meat could come out. Flies hovered on top of the gauze, couldn't get down to the meat. Maggots appeared on the gauze. In the third situation where there was some parchment, this is probably when I started playing actually, these things. There was some parchment, there were no flies because they couldn't smell it, and there were no maggots. And it was a guy called Francesco Redi in 1668 who actually came up with a theory called spontaneous generation. That didn't exist, that things didn't just appear from nowhere. They had to be created, there had to be something, there had to be a cause and effect. Okay, and Francesco Redi, there's a song by U2, but we're not quite there yet, called Zoo Station, and that's the opening to Zoo Station, where it goes, I'm ready for the laughing gas. There's my really, really tenuous link to kind of get me back on track. Laughing gas, does anyone know what laughing gas is? And the chemical equation for nitrous oxide is N2O. Yeah, this is like a test like being back at school, isn't it? We'll do some maths in a minute as well. So is nitrous oxide. And again, I think it's really important to say no to excuses and no to explanations. Some of you may recognise that quote. Very famous coach in the NFL, who's not anymore, used that as kind of his mantra with his team. They won the Super Bowl against Chicago in Miami several years ago. So Tony Dungy, so if you ever read any of his books, Uncommon, or I can't remember what his other book's called, he talks about a culture of no excuses and no explanations. And basically I think this is what he was saying, just cut the crap, show us you're willing. You've got the peacock with a big fantail showing off, but the peahens just want to see its willy. That's all they're really cared about. They don't want to know the rest of it. In terms of showing the willy, there is a famous little image on the Acton Baby album from Adam Clayton, who almost showed his willy. And Acton Baby, there's the front cover of the album, was released in 1991, and it was the inspiration for 2 teachers in New York who actually teach at the Lou Gehrig Academy, the baseball player, who put the Knowledge is Power program together. And this was one of their basic tenets that they said to their students, when you're in class, you need to slump, you need to sit up straight, and I actually like to put the word smile in there as well, because it's fun, going back to what we were talking about earlier. You need to listen, you need to ask and answer questions, you need to nod your head, and you need to track the speaker, which I have to say, all of you guys have done so far at some point, and I don't expect you to do that all the time. And again, I saw yesterday the new Texas head coach. He had a series of expectations for his players, and I'll just read a couple. So he says, players will attend all of their classes and sit in the front 2 rows of all of their classes. GAs, positional coach, academics folk will be constantly checking now. And I think that, you know, again, who was Coach Paul was talking about his players doing the duck thing. What's that called? Duck to me. I'm just checking to see if you know. I haven't forgotten. I'm just checking to see if you know. If I was an offensive lineman, because I'm smart, if I was asked to do the duck to means to the board, I would make sure I'm sat in the front row. So I have to do it for a less distance. I wouldn't be the cool O-lineman at the back, because I'd have to do the duck to mean a lot further. So no headphones in class, no texting in class, sit up and take notes. I think that's a bit draconian, you know, and if any of you have looked over at me at various points during this morning, and I've got no expectation as to why you would do that, you might have noticed that I was on my iPad, I was on my phone, I was doing lots of other things, because I was listening to what was going on, but I was also kind of making some notes. I was also, you know, researching a couple of things as well. So I've already posted on my Twitter account a link to the success triangle that Matt talked about. So again, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see from my feed today that it's got a link to about a 17-page PDF. And I've done that for me, really, but you know, you can tap in and use that as well. So you know, the expectations are really, really quite important. And in 1993, the year before the Knowledge is Power programme launched, again another tenuous link, that was when I got my first coaching badge, if you like. And maybe as British American football, we ought to do badges. We ought to invest in actually having a, you know, BAFCA level 1 coach and a BAFCA level 2 coach, and we're not going to go near level 3 at the moment. But in 1996, that's when I actually did my basic requirement module, which is the equivalent of level 1. Signed by Chip Buttery, the executive director, what a great name that is, and Jim Messenger, who was president back in 1996, just to give you some idea of his longevity. And Jim was succeeded as BAFCA president by this guy, Russ Hewitt, and a couple of years ago Russ was doing the Insanity workout program, and he won't thank me for putting these pictures on. There's no video, fortunately, but he posted these about his, you know, post-exercise feelings. And again, he was able to provide feedback to himself as to how he was doing, so he could reflect on these the following morning, on day 10 and then on day 11. How did I feel yesterday? Right, do I feel better? Am I making progress? And again, that feedback's really, really important. And insanity, again, definition, I don't know if Albert Einstein said this, it's doing things over and over again and expecting different results. This is insanity, doing things over and over again, expecting different results. This is insanity, doing things over and over again, expecting different results. This is, get where I'm going? This was a really famous album, really famous song by a group called Aslan. Not that Aslan, that Aslan. And in fact, it's been played on Irish stations since 1994, I think. It's been continually on their playlist, and U2 covered it earlier this year, which kind of brought it back and actually got to number 2 in the charts. So, you know, this is really important for me, and there's a phrase in it that goes, everybody hits you, everybody knocks you down, you know, which is what our sport's all about. You know, and particularly I found from my own experience as one of the better ball skill players, rather than the big skill players, that everyone was trying to use me as a target and trying to knock me out, which, you know, is in the nicest possible way, is the name of the game. So again, there's a good quote there. Don't know whether it's from Vince Lombardi about getting knocked down. In fact, there is me getting knocked down. And in fact, when we played the London Olympians in the last game of the season, I had the chance to do the same to one of their players. You know, and then what comes around goes around. So where have I got to? And doing things over and over again. This is in the charts for years and years. Probably remember this, those of you that are old enough. Great song. Yeah, apart from the fact that, yeah, until it was played over and over and over and over again. Does anyone know how long it was number 1 for? 16 weeks. It's obviously on your picture. Yeah, and it got replaced as at number 1 by The Fly. Again, there's kind of a link back to some of the things that I talked about, which was done by U2. And when U2 played The Fly live on their Zoo TV tour and subsequent tour still, they have a series of words flashing off in the background, kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Can't remember, but it'll come back to me in about 5 minutes. Yeah, kind of subconscious messages. And importantly, and again, I quite like the one top left, because when you sort of take that into a different phrase, I think that's really, really important. And again, can you read that out loud? Can you read that out loud? Yes, you can. Read it out loud. Let me turn that into an instruction rather than a question. Attitude is everything. And what's missing? No, you. See, some quick learners, some remedial students in the class. Yeah, and again, I think your attitude is really, really important. And I particularly love the word attitude because it's all about giving 100%. If A is equal to 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, E is 5, and you do that for the other letters of the alphabet, so I is not, I sound like Ali G, I is not 9, clearly I is older than 9, I is 9, T is 20, and U, not you, but U is 21. If you add those numbers up, those letters up, it comes to 100. So if you've got the right attitude, you give it 100%. If you work hard, W-O-R-K-H-A-R-D, it's 96. And you can go away and try this and check this, but it's true, okay? So I think that's really important. Give it 100%. And expect that from your players. Demand it of your players, okay? 100% of what they've got that day. And again, I don't like the cliche of giving it 101%, 110%. You can't give more than 100%. That's just bullshit. B-U-L-L-S-H-I-T. Go in again, add it up. It adds up to over 100%. But attitude is everything. And again, the second U that was missing kind of brings us full circle. There should be a 22 up there to U too. And again, one of the lines from their song, The Fly, is it's no secret that the stars are falling from the sky. And again, in this illustration, the star could be... Who's the star in American football? Who are the stars in the game of American football? Is it the players or is it the coach? Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I find it really difficult to know who the star is, but in terms of the players, it could be the coach. In terms of the game, it could actually be the players are falling from the sky. They're crashing to earth because as coaches, we're not doing anything to put them back up in the sky where they belong. And again, in terms of The Fly, lots of things flashed on screen. This one really resonated with me. In fact, I'm going to change it because the Coach Bono is smoking a cigarette. For any of you that were at BAFCA convention, AGM several years ago, there was a big discussion about smoking. And this one appeals to me. Coming from a point where everything you know is wrong. And if you adopt that mindset now, that can really help you to be effective going forwards. And again, I posted some stuff, where we talk about maybe chopping the Joshua tree down, thinking differently. What you know and how wise you are two completely different things. You might know a tomato's a fruit, but wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. You might know things about coaching, but wisdom is actually taking them and applying them into what you do with your players every time you meet them. So again, I think when you look at stuff, take from it what you think is useful and put your own different slant on it. Adjust it according to your personality, your situation, the environment, things around you. And after all, every artist is accountable, every poet's a thief. Steal things from all over the place. There's so much out there these days. And again, I was looking back through some of my old paper-based files, and I was really limited in what I could get access to. It relied on people physically giving me a document, which either I had to then run to a photocopier and scan, or I had to take that and return it to them at some later point. So sharing information and getting information from all over the place is really important. Because you probably know what this building is. And have you ever been to...
It's where the space shuttle.
It's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It's the second largest room in the world. It's the vehicle assembly building. The largest room in the world, you're smiling because I actually was doing some stuff with it, is that room. It's the room for improvement. I was actually talking to some of the coaches from the Surge several weeks ago before Christmas, and I kind of led them down this path and pulled out of my notes those two images on pieces of paper, and it just happened the conversation, I might have guided it slightly, but it went that way, and they were like, how on earth have you brought that with you? So it's about being prepared and knowing your stuff so that you can actually help people to improve. So I want you to use your heads, as you've already begun doing so. but not in this way. And hopefully you'll get to a point, ultimately, the aim might be for you to achieve and to be able to do stuff standing on your head. Or, you know, you might be flying without wings. Does anyone recognise who that is? It's Vince Lombardi, when he was at Fordham University as one of the 7 blocks of granite. And again, I think he's been misquoted massively, and he, you know, on film was really apologetic for saying winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. He was one of the first coaches that actually talked about love for his players in a un-PC way, problems with safeguarding way. And again, I think there's lots of inspiration to be drawn from some of his teachings when you actually dig down and see what they're about, rather than taking, that's my alarm, which tells me I need to get to a certain point, which, you know, is really, really important. So, we're not going to wipe the board clean, there are changes ahead, and again, I put some stuff on sort of via Dropbox and via the Facebook account about a positive mindset and a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Then if you have a look at that, that means yes, that means no, no. So go back and have a look. This is work by a researcher called Carol Dweck, and again I was at a judo England talent development camp the other week, and as I walked in the door I was really pleased to see that that was on kind of their information to all of their athletes taking part in the assessment. And they actually put it into some kind of context. When I share these slides, I'll probably reconfigure the images so they're not so stretched, so that you can actually read what it says on them more clearly. And I've deliberately stretched them so you can't read, so you can't take too many notes. But that's basically what a growth mindset is about. And I was going to get you, so I'm going to flip through this, to rate your growth mindset in a variety of different, variety of different situations. Generally, with football, with coaching football, offensive, defensive or special teams, and then related to your position. Most of the time, evidence tells us that our growth mindset gets more fixed the more we think we know about something. And I feel that way. I've got quite a fixed mindset. It is slightly open, and it's slightly open to some growth, about how coaching ought to be done. And how, in particular, American football coaching ought to be done, which I think is slightly different from what I see as being normal practice, average practice, you know, the middle of that bell curve that I showed you earlier. So I was going to do that, but we just won't have enough time, and I was going to do something with numbers there as well. But let me just show you these numbers. What I've basically done here, I've adapted a teaching tool, which sometimes teachers portray as a menu. These might be a series of tasks that I want you to do. The 1-star ones at the top are the easiest. The 5-star ones at the bottom are the hardest. Now, all I'd like you to do, we'll just do this for like 30 seconds, is to pick 2 numbers on there that you think you would know the relevance to the sport of American football. So from whichever level you think is best. Done that? So make a noise to tell me you've done that. Have you done that? Yes or no, we'll do all of them. Yeah, okay, right. So let's go through some of these. So number 2 at the top. Points for safety. 22. Yeah, number 7. 9. No, there's 7 officials. 7 officials. So 9. Including video replay. No, okay, we'll come back to that. 6. 20. 13 and a third.
Lines.
So 13 and a third yards between hashes in college. Good answer. 160. That's probably actually really an easy one. If you think in terms of distances, I'll give you a clue.
Width of the field in feet.
It's 160 feet, 53 and a third yards. Yeah, although looking at Jim, because I know he coaches junior and youth, that may be a different width in junior and youth game, and maybe no one knows the answer. 7 and a third.
The yards in the NFL,
Sorry?
yards in the hashes in the NFL.
No, because that's actually the answer to 6. 6 is the width in yards of a goalpost. And I was talking to a coach the other day who didn't know that the goalpost was 6 yards wide. And that's not saying that that's a bad thing, because said review giving me an indication from your expressions that you didn't know that either.
Is it 18 feet and 6 inches though?
That's how high the crossbar, the post, the uprights extend on the crossbar. And that's really, really important, because if you don't know the dimensions in which you're playing your sport, how can you hope your players can be successful? If you don't know the width of a pitch, if you don't know that there's 9 yards on a full-scale pitch from the sideline to the top of the numbers, how can you get your wide receivers to line up correctly? So 7 1/3 is 7 1/3 is the perfect distance from which to score a touchdown. Do a quick conversion. How many feet is that? How many feet does it take to score a touchdown? 22. It takes all 11 players with their 2 feet. That's why that's a 5-star answer, because I'm 5-star and you're not yet. Okay. Last one you'll never get. 112 plus 5. That is the number of games I have lost. So when you were talking about the number of games your Napier Knights have lost, I kind of internally smiled and went, you ought to try losing some more. Okay. And again, there's a really well-known commercial, a Nike commercial. Michael Jordan talks about failing over and over again. Here's an assumption. We lose, we learn. I know that in many of those 112 plus 5 games I've played, and the plus 5 is that I've tied 10, and they've not been awarded ties, they've been actual ties on the field, that I necessarily haven't learned from those, and my coaches and fellow teammates haven't necessarily learned. Because learning doesn't just come from nowhere, it doesn't spontaneously generate itself. Go back to one of the fly experiments. We need to actively do something if we're going to fail. So that's kind of the answers there. So I thought I'd do a numbers thing. And again, I think numbers are really important, particularly in a game where, like American football, there's so many numbers. I saw this via Twitter, which was the free throw percentage that players that the LA Lakers were getting in practice compared to their percentages in the game. And for me, it's really interesting that someone like Steve Nash, so 4th from the bottom, was getting 97% in practice and 91.9% in games. So he was, he's one of the best players at that skill. Other players, I think Dumont at the top was getting 89 in practice and 46 in games. Someone else, Howard, was getting 82 and then was down to 49. Now that, I think, has a massive implication has several massive implications for us as coaches. Do you ever chart anything from practice? Do you ever use those statistics to help you? And that's not saying yes, do that, because I think statistics are a bit like a cheerleader's outfit. They show us quite a bit of stuff, but they don't tell us everything. Okay, so again, I think that's really important, and we've talked about using our minds. And I'm just going to flip through some of this really quickly, because I plan, obviously, for far more than we're going to get through. But again, I think it's really important to be aware of what's out there and get to the bottom of it. Learning styles, visual, auditory, reading, kinesthetic. There is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that they are effective in helping you to learn. But the best presenters of information use a variety of techniques which draw upon these styles. Okay? And I don't think necessarily that anyone here would do that as part of their coaching and plan for different styles. But be aware that when you're delivering something to your players, give them the chance to do it to mimic you. When Coach was talking about lifting and putting your elbows together rather than blocking like that, I actually sat there and went, oh yeah, I see that works. Now if the coach had told me just stand still and watch, no, don't do it, John, just stand still and watch. As someone who sometimes learns through kinesthetic means, he is limiting my effectiveness. Okay, but be aware, there's loads of research out there, and sometimes it's wrong. So I've got some things, again, from teaching here. If we're talking about a taxonomy of understanding and of application, how many of us, I've been guilty of doing this when I've coached, in chalkboard sessions, check for knowledge, check for comprehension. And that's it. So our players know what to do, they understand why to do it, but the ultimate test is they don't do it on the field. Because we haven't given them a chance to apply it, to analyse it, to synthesise it, or for them to evaluate themselves.